For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has become one of the most mysterious and controversial pieces of cloth on the face of the planet.
The Shroud of Turin, a controversial religious artifact. While traditional scientific analysis has produced conflicting results about its authenticity, recent research suggests the shroud may actually be around 2,000 years old, potentially dating back to the time of Jesus. Now, many Christians are tired of the uncertainty, and that's why this centuries-long mystery has been solved by AI. But rather than make Christians happy, they are worried. Wait, and more importantly, what did the AI reveal? Keep your eyes glued to the screen to get your answers in detail. Come along. What is the Shroud of Turin, and why does it matter? In a quiet, temperature-controlled chapel in Turin, Italy, lies a piece of linen cloth that continues to stir up wonder, debate, and deep spiritual reflection. At first glance, it might look like just an old fabric, measuring 14 feet 3 inches long by 3 feet 7 inches wide. But anyone who knows even a little about the Shroud of Turin knows it's anything but ordinary. Fred, a longtime history enthusiast, once said that when he saw the shroud in person, he didn't just see a relic, he felt like he was standing in front of a question no one could fully answer. Isn't that what mysteries do? They don't always offer conclusions. Sometimes they offer questions so profound, they shake something deep in us. The shroud bears a faint, almost ghostly image of a man, his front and back both visible as if his body had been laid down on one half of the cloth, while the other half folded over him like a blanket. People often ask, who is this man? Could it truly be Jesus Christ? Or is it the work of a skilled forger from a bygone era? The answer, it seems, has slipped through the hands of scientists, historians, skeptics, and believers alike for hundreds of years. Could a piece of cloth really hold the image of Jesus? For centuries, people believed the Shroud of Turin was sacred proof. But now AI has taken a closer look, and what it uncovered has people questioning everything. What did it see that we didn't? Watch till the end, because the truth might just shock you. The first time this mysterious cloth shows up in history is in 1354 when a French knight named Geoffroy de Charny presented it to the church in Lire, France. He claimed it was Jesus's burial shroud, an extraordinary claim, considering how many relics were circulating in medieval Europe at the time. But not long after, in 1389, the Bishop of Troyes dismissed the shroud outright, even alleging that an artist had confessed to fabricating the image. Yet, if it really was just a clever painting, why did it keep resurfacing in the hands of royals and religious authorities? Why did it survive wars, fires, and skepticism? By 1453, the cloth had found its way into the possession of the House of Savoy, a royal family that moved it to Chambéry. It was there, in 1532, that it narrowly escaped destruction in a fire, which left behind visible burn marks and water stains that remain today. Still, it endured. In 1578, it was transferred to the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, where it has remained ever since. When former King Umberto II died in 1983, the shroud passed from the royal family to the Catholic Church. Yet, even now, the Church has stopped short of calling it the true burial cloth of Christ. Why? Because the mystery is too great, and perhaps the responsibility of such a claim even greater. But what makes the shroud so extraordinary isn't just the story surrounding it. It's the image itself. Scientists who've studied it up close say it's unlike anything they've ever seen. It's not drawn, it's not painted. It doesn't seem to come from any dye, pigment, or photographic process. The image is a kind of straw yellow discoloration, barely there, and yet, when viewed in photographic negative, it reveals stunningly clear anatomical details. Not only that, but the image contains three-dimensional data, something no known artwork or photograph from that era, or even today, naturally produces. One researcher once remarked, "It's as if the cloth recorded a moment, not in paint or ink, but in some process we still don't understand." And then there are the wounds, reddish-brown stains that match what the Gospels describe of Jesus' crucifixion. Small punctures on the scalp that look like they came from a crown of thorns, lash marks across the back, a large elliptical wound on the side from a Roman spear. Modern tests have confirmed the presence of real human blood, type AB, the same type most commonly found in people from the Middle East. Could this all be coincidence, or is it something more? In 1978, a team of scientists conducted one of the most thorough investigations into the shroud. They confirmed what many had suspected. There was no trace of paint, no brush strokes, and no evidence of modern photographic techniques. Some even floated the theory that the image could have been caused by a sudden burst of radiation, possibly ultraviolet light. But no one has managed to recreate such an effect, not even with today's technology. And that brings up another question. If it can't be faked now, how could it have been faked 700 years ago? Of course, not everyone agrees. Skeptics have pointed to carbon dating tests from the late 1980s that dated the cloth to the Middle Ages. But those results have also been questioned due to possible contamination or sampling from a repaired area of the cloth. The debate, like the shroud itself, refuses to fade. For Christians around the world, the shroud holds a deep emotional and spiritual meaning. Some believe it's the closest physical link to Jesus Christ's suffering and resurrection. Others see it as an icon, regardless of authenticity, that moves the heart toward faith. Interestingly, ever since the 4th century, most depictions of Jesus, long hair, beard, somber expression, seem to mirror the face seen on the shroud. Is that coincidence too? Or has the shroud silently shaped our image of Christ for centuries? Today, the shroud continues to pull people in from all walks of life: believers, scientists, skeptics, and the simply curious. What keeps drawing them? Is it the chance that we might be looking at the cloth that once covered the body of Jesus? Or is it the deeper mystery of how something so ancient, so fragile, and so disputed can still make us stop, stare, and wonder? The science behind the controversy. The debate over the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin has spanned decades, stirring deep emotions, heated arguments, and plenty of confusion. And perhaps the most puzzling part? Even science can't seem to agree with itself. Back in 1988, scientists from 3 prestigious laboratories, Arizona, Zurich, and Oxford, conducted carbon-14 dating tests on samples taken from the shroud. Their findings were strikingly consistent. They dated the fabric to between 1260 and 1390 CE, which just happened to fall in line with the first documented appearance of the shroud in the 1350s. Naturally, many people took this as the final word. After all, 3 different labs came to the same conclusion using the same scientific technique. What more proof did people need? As far as those researchers were concerned, the shroud was not the burial cloth of Jesus. It was a medieval forgery. But here's where it gets interesting. Fast forward to 2022, and suddenly, the story takes a surprising turn. A new team of researchers decided to look at the linen from a different angle, literally. They used a technique called wide-angle X-ray scattering, or WAX-S, to study the structure of the cellulose inside the linen fibers. Instead of measuring radioactive decay like carbon dating does, WAX looked at how the linen had physically broken down over time. And guess what they found? The way the fibers had aged looked very similar to other pieces of linen known to be from the 1st century in Israel. In simple terms, this new study seemed to say, hold on a minute, maybe the shroud is actually 2,000 years old after all. So, Now people were left with two completely different sets of results. One said the shroud was medieval, the other said it could be ancient. Which one should people believe? Some critics of the 1988 study have since raised concerns about the way the carbon dating was done. For one, the sample used in the test came from a single corner of the shroud, just a small piece of fabric. But what if that corner had been repaired during the Middle Ages? What if it wasn't part of the original cloth at all? In fact, some researchers argue that this particular area might have been rewoven or patched up by medieval hands, especially considering the wear and tear the shroud has endured over the centuries. Others point out that the fabric could have been contaminated by centuries of handling, exposure to fire, or even by bacteria that may have thrown off the carbon measurements. In 2017, statistical analyses of the raw data were released, and they showed something unexpected. The results weren't actually as uniform as previously thought. There were inconsistencies that suggested the samples weren't all from the same time period. That's a pretty big deal, right? So now, we're left with this fascinating mystery. Is the Shroud of Turin a 14th century hoax? Or could it truly be a relic from the time of Christ? The truth seems to sit somewhere in the tension between the different scientific methods, the questions of sample quality, and the deep emotional investment people have in the artifact. What happens when centuries of mystery meet the most advanced tools of today? Stay with us, because what AI did with the shroud might just change how you look at history, and at the face behind the myth. How AI created a new image from the shroud. Recently, something quite fascinating caught the attention of millions around the world. An AI-generated image that claimed to show the true face of Jesus, created from the famously mysterious Shroud of Turin. Now, for anyone who's even heard a whisper of this ancient cloth's legend, this digital development probably raises a few questions. What did Jesus really look like? Could this be even remotely accurate? And how did a piece of old linen suddenly become the centerpiece of a tech-powered global conversation? Well, that's exactly what happened. And the story behind it is just as layered as the linen itself. The buzz began when the Daily Express, a British tabloid, decided to take a modern spin on an age-old relic. They used advanced tools and high-resolution photos of the Shroud of Turin to enhance and interpret the faint facial imprint that's been at the heart of both fascination and skepticism for centuries. The result? A detailed digital face, a man with long hair, a beard, a serious, almost weary expression, and subtle wounds on his face. It resembled what many would consider a traditional image of Jesus, yet it was different enough to make people stop, think, and share. Was this image based on science, faith, artistry, or something else altogether? To create the image, the newspaper didn't just use Photoshop or basic photo editing. They relied heavily on Midjourney, a powerful AI program known for creating lifelike images from written prompts. This wasn't just someone feeding in random guesses, there was an effort to be precise, to feed the system with details from the shroud itself. And for those who know a little about the Shroud of Turin, they'll tell you this cloth isn't just any piece of fabric. It's believed by some to have wrapped Jesus's body after the crucifixion, bearing a faint imprint that has stirred debates, documentaries, pilgrimages, and now even digital recreations. What made this moment even more intriguing was how other media outlets jumped on the bandwagon. Not long after the Express's image went viral, The Sun created their own version using a different AI tool called GenCraft. It was like a sudden AI renaissance of religious imagery, with each outlet offering its own visual interpretation of one of history's most elusive figures. And what did people think? Some were amazed, some were skeptical. Others found it moving, while many couldn't help but wonder, are we getting closer to the truth? Or are we just building newer myths with smarter machines? The emotional pull of this image can't be overstated. For some, seeing a face, even a digitally interpreted one, attached to the figure of Jesus adds a human layer to centuries of abstract worship. It makes the spiritual feel more tangible, like a bridge between ancient faith and modern technology. But then again, isn't it fair to ask, can a machine really capture the soul of a man worshipped by billions? Can AI understand the divine? Or is it just reflecting our own imaginations back at us? This moment also brings up bigger, broader questions about how we use technology to interpret history and religion. It's one thing to use AI to colorize old photos or simulate ancient architecture, but it's something else entirely when you apply it to a figure as sacred and mysterious as Jesus. It opens up conversations about belief, ethics, authenticity, and even ownership, because who gets to say what Jesus looked like? Should it be guided by historical documents, artistic tradition, faith, or now AI? For believers and non-believers alike, the image becomes more than pixels. It becomes a reflection of how far technology has come and how deeply we still yearn to see, touch, and understand the mysteries of our past. And it's worth noting that despite centuries of religious art, despite countless depictions in cathedrals and culture, something about this AI-generated image felt new. Maybe it's the detail. Maybe it's the way technology can make the distant feel intimate. Or maybe it's because we're still looking for connection in pixels, paintings, or prayers. But what happens when we place this image side by side with the ones we've known our whole lives? With the traditional depictions passed down through faith and culture? Let's take a closer look, because how this modern vision compares to the classics might just reveal more about us than the subject itself. Don't blink, the contrast might surprise you. How the AI image compares to traditional depictions. The moment the AI-generated image of Jesus began making rounds on the internet, the conversation sparked like wildfire. People from all corners of the web paused, looked closer, and asked the same thing. How could a machine come so close to what so many have imagined for centuries? The image, with its sepia tones and quiet intensity, felt oddly familiar. It had that timeless look, almost like an old family photo tucked away in a dusty album. But there was something more. The face looked gentle but weathered, solemn yet comforting. And then there were the tiny but noticeable bruises and marks. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make you think, is this the suffering Savior we've read about in Sunday school or seen painted across cathedral walls? Many said it reminded them of the Jesus they grew up with. The long, flowing hair, the wise, steady gaze. The kind of face you could imagine kneeling before in a candlelit chapel or seeing on the cover of an old prayer book. Some were amazed. They said the AI had captured not just an image, but a feeling. Something spiritual, even holy. But then came the others. Those who looked at it and asked, wait a minute, is this really Jesus? Or just another Western version of him? Because, if we're honest, most of the images of Jesus floating around out there, whether in paintings, movies, or church statues, are more European than Middle Eastern. Critics were quick to point out that this image, for all its emotion and detail, might still be a product of bias. After all, the AI that created it, Midjourney, had been trained on millions of pictures already available online. And what kind of Jesus dominates those digital archives? The blue-eyed, light-skinned one, not the Jewish man from first-century Palestine. And then came the experts, particularly those from religious and academic circles who had a more skeptical view. Catholic AI specialists and theologians chimed in, gently reminding everyone that while the image was powerful, it didn't come from archaeological data or verified DNA reconstructions. It came from algorithms, probability, and a whole lot of influence from existing portrayals. Some argued that relying on AI to define such a sacred figure felt like handing over a spiritual torch to a robot. Others didn't mind. They said it didn't matter where the image came from, as long as it helped people reflect, connect, or even just pause for a moment of quiet thought. Fred, a teacher from Oregon, said he stared at the image for 10 minutes without saying a word. "I don't know if it's real," he admitted, "but it made me feel something." Maria, a former art history student, said it gave her goosebumps. "It's like the AI knew what we needed to see, not just the polished, perfect Jesus, but the one who actually suffered." But not everyone felt that warmth. A few were unsettled by how much they liked it. One user posted, "Isn't it weird that a machine made this, and I still felt something sacred? What does that say about me or about faith in general?" And that's really the heart of the whole debate, isn't it? Does it matter if something spiritual comes from a machine if it touches the spirit? Or is that line too sacred to cross? This image has opened a door many didn't expect to walk through. A conversation not just about faith and technology, but about memory, culture, and what we choose to see when we think of the divine. We're talking about faith, about reverence, about what we hold holy in a world that keeps blurring the lines between human and machine. And while some are calling it inspiring, others are calling it dangerous. Because for many Christians, this isn't just about an image, it's about the soul. And what's coming next might just explain why some are deeply, sincerely worried. Stay with us, because the reasons might not be what you expect. Why some Christians are worried. As news of the AI-generated image derived from the Shroud of Turin continues to make its way around the globe, it's no surprise that a wave of unease has rippled through Christian communities. For many believers, this isn't just about technology or digital art. It's about something far more personal and sacred. Some are calling it fascinating, while others can't help but feel a quiet dread creeping in. What happens when machines start interpreting what, to them, is the face of God? Is there a line we shouldn't cross, even if it's possible? Many Christians, especially those deeply rooted in tradition, are raising serious concerns about what this all means for their faith. The core of their worry isn't really about pixels or algorithms, it's about intention. They've begun asking, can a machine truly grasp the mystery of divinity? Catholic theologians have voiced strong opinions, pointing out that even if the AI-generated image looks clearer or more realistic than the original shroud, it may be missing the very point. They argue that trying to enhance what many see as a divinely orchestrated relic could be an act of subtle arrogance. After all, who are we to think we can improve on something many consider a miracle? There's something deeply human about sacred art. Historically, it has never just been about how something looks. Sacred images are infused with personal reflection, emotional weight, and spiritual intent. Artists who painted icons or sculpted saints did so with prayer, with fasting, and often with a sense of spiritual responsibility. Can a machine ever replicate that? Can an AI truly understand suffering, devotion, hope, or the divine spark behind those emotions? And if not, what does that say about the AI-generated image? Is it beautiful, perhaps, but hollow? And then there's the theological angle that makes everything more complicated. As AI becomes more advanced, developing systems that mimic human thinking and creativity, the question naturally arises, where does human imagination end, and where does divine inspiration begin? Theologians are increasingly concerned that relying on AI to create religious imagery could blur the lines between what is holy and what is artificial. If spiritual truths are filtered through code and algorithms, is there a danger of distorting the message? Is it still a sacred image, or just a clever imitation? For some, this conversation goes even deeper. They're worried that bringing AI into spaces once reserved for sacred reflection may weaken the emotional and spiritual bond believers have with these objects. When something as revered as the Shroud of Turin, a relic believed by many to bear the face of Christ, is interpreted by a machine, does it make it easier for people to forget the mystery? After all, isn't faith supposed to be about belief in things unseen? Isn't part of the power of the shroud its ambiguity, its mystery, the fact that it invites wonder, not clarity? People like Father Miguel, a priest from Spain, have been quoted saying that while technology has its place in helping humans understand the world, there are realms where it simply does not belong. He shared with his congregation that AI can analyze blood patterns, simulate facial structures, and build a digital face. But what it cannot do is capture the sacred silence, the quiet grief, the depth of love believers see when they gaze at the original cloth. According to him, reducing that moment of reverence to a computer-generated image risks turning mystery into spectacle. Even among more progressive Christian circles, the concerns aren't easily dismissed. Some acknowledge that AI might help historians understand the physical features or context of the man wrapped in the shroud, but they draw a firm line at turning those calculations into images for devotion. Is this really about faith? One seminary student asked in an interview, or is it about satisfying our need to see everything, explain everything, and control everything? The debate continues to unfold across forums, church halls, and online communities, with no clear resolution in sight. But one thing is certain: this moment has stirred a deeply human reaction: fear of replacing faith with technology. There's something quietly unsettling, maybe even heartbreaking, about watching faith evolve in a world where technology moves faster than human understanding can keep up. And lately, people like Daniel, a lifelong believer and devout churchgoer, have found themselves at a strange crossroad. In his view, when churches start using artificial intelligence to respond to prayers, it's not just a clever innovation, it's the beginning of something deeply unnatural. He's said more than once, a prayer isn't a text you send and get an auto-response. It's a cry of the heart. And really, doesn't that make sense? Isn't the whole point of prayer about reaching out to something or someone beyond ourselves with the hope that a living being is listening? Daniel worries that as churches rely more on AI to engage with believers, something sacred is getting lost in translation. He described visiting a small church that had introduced an AI-powered virtual assistant. At first, people were curious, asking it for Bible verses, scheduling confessions, even receiving automated blessings. But over time, the human touch began to disappear. Pastors were replaced by screens. Face-to-face moments gave way to pre-recorded sermons. And then came the virtual religious ceremonies, live-streamed services, digital sacraments, holographic choirs. What happens to the soul of a gathering, Daniel asked, when nobody gathers anymore? He wasn't against technology, not in the least. He understood the benefits: reaching the homebound, connecting believers across the globe, even offering solace during a pandemic. But to him, faith had always been about showing up, sitting beside someone in the pew, holding hands during prayer, crying together, singing together, breaking bread together. Can a live stream replicate that? Can an algorithm offer empathy? These weren't rhetorical questions to Daniel. They were sincere concerns rising from his experience as someone who's watched churches grow quieter and more digitized. Then there's the issue of sacred symbols, and Daniel brought up one example that stayed with him: the Shroud of Turin, a deeply revered artifact believed by many to bear the image of Christ himself. For centuries, it was approached with awe, prayer, and reverence. But now, with AI tools being used to enhance the image, clarify it, color it, animate it, Daniel feared we were crossing a line. Are we admiring a relic or tweaking a JPEG? He asked somberly. He wasn't angry about the technology itself. What troubled him was the mindset behind it. The urge to fix something that was never meant to be a product, to improve a miracle. When we take something that's supposed to move us spiritually and try to optimize it, he said, we're not drawing closer to God. We're just playing with pixels. And he's not alone. These kinds of conversations are happening in coffee shops, online forums, and late-night Bible studies all over. People are asking, where's the line between helpful tools and harmful replacements? When we let AI help us organize or teach, that's one thing. But when it starts doing the praying for us, when it becomes the priest, the choir, and the congregation, isn't that something worth pausing for? Daniel believes that Christian faith, at its core, is about community. It's about people being with people, real, messy, beautiful people. Not because they're efficient, not because they're optimized, but because God works through relationships. Through moments of discomfort, awkward hugs, shared laughter, and long silences that only happen when you're truly present with others. Faith isn't just an idea, he said. It's an experience, and experiences need real people. He doesn't claim to have all the answers. He knows some folks feel empowered by digital worship. Some feel closer to God because of new technologies, and that's okay. But he wants to make sure the conversation stays grounded. He wants people to ask, are we making these changes to deepen our connection to God, or are we making them because it's easier, cheaper, and trendier? With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.